We are sitting at CBD in Indianapolis, ACFW Conference 2013, and we're speaking today with Allison Pittman, who is not only known for her wonderful stories. The one that we're speaking about today is all for a story, very different than what she's written in the past, but she also is an amazing critique person, and I can't tell you how many people have told me what a wonderful mentor you are. It's just amazing that you have touched so many lives here and helped so many of the writers, and that's the truth. That's something I didn't tell you off camera.
Well,
just saying.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Now, one of the things I was very curious about, All for a Story is it's written in the 20s, a very unusual time frame for most of our CBA audience. And I think that you wrote about an arena that has been a challenge because it was very real. You were writing about speakeasies and Monica's influence in a speakeasy and how she snuck in and told all the sneaky, chattery stories about what went on inside the speakeasies. And so we're going to talk about that in just a second, but there was one overriding question that I had. How did you come up with coffee grinds for a facial mask?
I just researched. I researched for home beauty remedies, and that was one of the first ones that came up. And I did it. I actually did it with the egg white and the coffee grinds, and my skin felt amazing. So if you get the book, after you read the book, and you do egg whites and then the grinds from your coffee, and you make a paste and you put it on your face and let it steam for about 5 minutes and then rinse it off. And your skin it's incredible.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, I just found that just funny. I thought that was great.
That's the first. I stopped my writing and went and did it. But I can't even put this in the book unless I know it works.
Oh,
so it does.
And it does.
It does.
Well, I could tell just by the way it wrote. I thought, that might really work. Now, you had, one of the things you had, which was really funny, is your character, Monica, went in and decided to infiltrate a no flirting club, which, by the way, they ended up flirting. But we won't go there. But now, was there actually a real no flirt club?
There was the anti-flirt club, and this book came from two very real aspects of the 1920s. There was a columnist who went by the name of Lipstick, she was a columnist in New York City, and that's what she did. She went to all the clubs, and she went to the underground clubs and the speakeasies, and she wrote about it. She wrote about fashion. She was like a precursor to blogging, and she had the anonymous name. And then
This one's anonymous name is
Monkey
yes,
Business.
Okay.
That's her column's Monkey Business. And so I was researching for another 20s book. So this is my third one in that era. And I just came across in this book, there was this one picture of Alice Riley with this caption underneath it. And it just said, Anti-Flirt Week. And I thought, what in the world is that? So I just got a very little bit of information about it, just, Googling and stuff like that. But I did find their 10 laws of not flirting.
Which you used throughout the book.
It's like, don't flirt with this one because then the real one might be walking behind you. And but that was, looking at this time period, women had been so unshackled, I guess, by the changes in society. Like literally, their clothes weighed less, their hair weighed less. They were just these free spirits. And I think they were engaging, they didn't know how to handle the attention and the approval of men and the advances of men, and they flirted right back with these men who suddenly felt like it was okay to openly be flirtatious and solicitous of their attention.
That's probably true.
And it's when you get too much freedom too fast, you're not going to be responsible with it. And so this woman, Alice Riley, just said, you need to have enough respect for yourself. And her mission was only to have them not flirt with men in cars. Like if a man whistles at you from his car, don't respond, because then he's going to feel like he can take the next step and the next step and the next step.
And that's the first thing Monica did in the story.
Yeah.
So her going to the anti-flirt club meant that she was really going into the anti-flirt club with a very different attitude. Mm-hmm. She wanted to put them down. She wanted to belittle them, and yet mock them, and yet she learned from them.
Well, she had that perception of herself as this modern woman, that what I'm doing is okay. Mm-hmm. So she's engaged in an affair that she should not be engaged in. She interacts with men in a way that is not appropriate, by many different standards, but she wants to justify it because that's just the way we are. And that's just the way the world is, that's the way life is, and if it's okay for me, what do you care if I'm flirting with men? We don't have a right, like women don't have a right to tell each other how to behave. And that's her defensiveness that she goes in with, and not seeing that it's a caretaking. I want that Riley's movement was about trying to take care and get women to care about themselves and their mm-hmm. reputations more.
Now, Monica was a reporter, as we discussed, mm-hmm. but she was really mired in her own sin. She was a titillating writer because she lived her involvement in speakeasies was almost to the point that she just defied the odds. Mm-hmm. Going to where she went, she drank, she smoked, she swore, mm-hmm. she did it all. Why did you choose a character so mired in sin as really the protagonist?
And what's so funny is my very first book, my character was a prostitute, and I still feel like my prostitute was less of a sinner than Monica was.
I've got to say,
because
I happen to read both.
Yes,
and that is true.
Gloria in 10,000 Charms is a prostitute, but she's a very naive and innocent prostitute, where Monica is making her own willful choices.
Yes,
and I think a lot of times in CBA books, we have our heroines and our female characters who are not willfully choosing their sin. There's always some sort of, not always, but a victimization to sort of
from their history.
There's a history. There's a reason that they're doing this and they're coming out. And Monica has a little bit of a tough childhood, but nothing that would justify the extent. She is a willful sinner, and we have to realize that people sin because it's fun. And they believe the lies of the world, and they believe the lies of Satan that say this is fun. And the time period, the 1920s, is the first time that you have our social mores leading us to sin. Before, all of these behaviors, if you're sleeping around and you're drinking and you're partying and you're having different partners and affairs, it was all hidden and it was shameful and you were shunned. But then after World War I, we lose our innocence, and you have social mores dictating and approving this kind of behavior. And that's so much tougher to fight against, but we still have to fight against it. And I've totally lost track of the question.
It doesn't matter. You were explaining. But one of the things I do want to ask you is, and we talked about this off camera, is Monica finally gets it, but it's not the singing angels and that type of thing.
Yeah,
you lead her to the point of
recognizing
her sin, and that was a very interesting way that you handled it. Can you explain that?
I can. Spoiler alert. Although it's a CBA book, so that at some point there has to be redemption. But
there's redemption, but it's interestingly handled.
It's an incomplete. It's the first steps of it, because I knew I had crafted her to be so dark and in denial, that for me to bring her through to accepting Jesus Christ as her Savior within this very short time span that the story happens, to me it just didn't ring real and authentic. I think we make messes of our lives. People who live outside of Christ, sometimes they make huge messes. And
Amen.
And it has to be cleaned up. And a prayer will save their soul. and a prayer will give them that eternal life, but a prayer does not clean up all the messes. And just, it was hard enough for me to even get her to that point where she can simply look at her life choices and recognize them as sin. At the beginning of the book, she wouldn't have even recognized them as wrong.
Right.
So she wasn't living with an attack of her conscience. You know, she wasn't saying, I shouldn't be doing this, but I am. She wasn't running from God or avoiding God. She didn't care. We have a huge secularization of our society in this era. Church just takes a huge back step. And so for me to even get her to the point where she looks around at her life and she gets to a very dark place where she's isolated from it and she sees the earthly consequences of it, and then can make that choice to, there could be spiritual consequences of this. I need to consider that. And I leave her really just on the brink of that consideration. Because I think if we can simply get people who live outside of Christ to acknowledge the sin in their life, without doing that, you cannot have complete redemption. And so, that's another thing that makes it so different from a lot of other books. And I hear from readers who say, I pray for your characters, I love your characters, I pray for Monica. But there's a Monica in everybody's life.
Yes.
Who's living outside of God's will and just needs to have some light shed on choices. And we don't like to do that. We don't want to condemn anybody's actions.
That's true. That's true.
And at some point, sometimes we have to.
Now, I was really curious. You brought in Monica going back to her home. Mm-hmm. And I felt that was a symbolism. Can you explain that a little bit?
It kind of shows, had she been given some more direction in life, maybe she might not have made some of the choices that she had. And she has a family who got very wealthy off of the war contracts. And they were able to kind of move up in society, but not really, because they were still poor. She didn't have anything that she really called a home to go to. Nothing that really could have been her own. And I think in that searching for a home and stability, she's also realizing the life that she's living is not home. Mm-hmm. There's nothing stable about it. It's a struggle. And so, but that's cutting that last tie to everything. She and Max, the hero, or the male hero in the story, they both have nobody. They have no family. They have no... It's a fresh start for both of them in a way. They're not coming with any kind of baggage with each other. And so cutting that house is that last tie so that she can go through a total reinvention.
That was a really great symbolic
I love that scene.
I love that scene. And she found just a kernel of her authentic self.
Yes, she found some writings that she had done, back when she wanted to be a more serious writer or do something else. And she completely lost track of who she thought she could be because all of these other influences came into her life. And that was this whole idea that, we can be redeemed. We can be restored. But sometimes we have messes to clean up in the meantime. Might have to lose a few things.
Now, what message would you like your readers to take for a story?
I think it is that idea that there's nothing that you can get yourself into that God cannot get you out of. Mm-hmm. And we might seem like we have no resources. And I think that's if it's somebody who doesn't know Christ or somebody who knows Christ but is justifying their sin. And we do that a lot. I have people that I know who are living in continuous, willful, sinful lives and want to say, it's all right, God understands, I don't have any choice. It's like, well, yeah, you do. It's a matter sometimes of sacrifice and just taking that first step to admit.
Accountability.
There you go. That's it.
Now, you mentor so many people. You're certainly helpful to so many new writers. Who mentors you? Who is the one that influences your life?
I have such a great, great circle of really close friends that I just love, and that I can just, the girl who is rooming with me here at this conference, I came out of the shower with a story idea, and we just sat and we just plotted the whole thing out.
That's what conferences are all about.
I can do that. And I have 3 or 4 really close friends that we have a private Facebook page called the Pit Crew, and that's where if I'm stuck in a story or I need some help with something, one is incredibly fluent in Spanish, and my book that comes out in the spring, I have a Spanish speaker, so I'm just constantly putting that on there. Is this right? How would you say this? I don't want her to sound like a Spanish teacher. I don't want it to sound like Google Translate.
Allison is a teacher in her former life, so that's part of the reason she naturally mentors so many people, and I think that's wonderful.
But I think too, I was talking to James Scott Bell this morning. I said, I can't ever talk about my writing journey without talking about him, because it was a single conversation with him that gave me the direction and the strength and the focus that I needed for absolutely everything that's ever happened in my writing career. Wow. And it was one conversation with him.
He's a pretty amazing guy.
He's fabulous. And I just think to myself, I get so much joy out of just like pouring myself into. How arrogant does that sound?
No.
I love to pour myself into other people. But, that's fun for me. And it keeps me really sharp. It keeps my instincts, I think, really sharp. And I love looking at people who are at a different place in their writing. And I love knowing that I might have played a part in that. That's just fun. It's like planning a party, and I don't know, being in charge of the cake.
Well, I have to tell you, it has been a great pleasure talking with you and finally really meeting you face to face.
This is the first face-to-face meeting.
We've discussed with one another, but we've never met face to face, and it has been a great pleasure.
Thank you.
And all the things you do for all the other writers is just amazing.
It's where God put me. So I'll keep doing that if I can keep writing books. That's all I want to do.
And you do. You have one of the things before I do conclude is let's talk about your books coming up.
Okay.
You have, in addition to All for a Story, which just came out.
Mm-hmm. And then in the spring comes out All for a Sister, which dark. I have the most deliciously evil woman in that book. She's like a Disney villain.
Ooh.
She's just fabulous. I'm so excited about that. But it's also a great story of redemption, forgiveness, and all that stuff. And then I just this summer signed for 3 more books with Tyndale.
Congratulations.
So when I get home, and I just haven't had a chance to just open a Word document and start writing. So Tuesday at 1:30, I will be doing Word 1, Chapter 1, Page 1 of a whole new story. That's a total standalone and is going in a really fun place.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
I really, really appreciate that.
Thank you.